The Amazon rainforest. Raw, wild, and absolutely essential to life as we know it. In this video, we're diving deep into the story behind the Amazon, a place born millions of years ago and is home to the greatest biodiversity on the planet. We'll uncover the ancient origins of the Amazon, explore the unimaginable diversity of life it holds, and break down the unique ecosystem and climate that make it unlike any other place on Earth. You'll meet the indigenous communities who have lived here for generations. Witness the impact of human activity and the consequence for our planet's future, and discover the powerful movements fighting back. Because this isn't just the story of a forest, it's the story of our future. The Amazon is the largest tropical rainforest on Earth, stretching across millions of square kilometers in the heart of South America. It's not just a forest, it's a living, breathing organism that regulates the global climate, generates weather patterns, and supports one of the richest biodiversities on the planet. The rainforest, spanning across 9 South American countries and covers an area of 6.7 million square kilometers. That's nearly the size of continental Australia, and it accounts for over half of all remaining tropical rainforest on Earth. At 60%, the largest portion is located in Brazil, followed by Peru and Colombia. But the forest doesn't stop at national borders. It stretches into Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, Guyana, Suriname and French Guiana. Together, this region is known as the Amazon Basin, named for the vast network of rivers dominated by the mighty Amazon River that flows through it all, collecting rainfall from across the jungle and feeding it back into the Earth's natural systems. From above, the Amazon looks like an endless sea of green, dense jungle stitched together with rivers, wetlands and tangled vines. To the west, it presses against the rising Andes. To the north and south, it bleeds into savannas and mountains, and throughout, it thrives on the equator's promise of year-round sunlight and rainfall. This mix of climate, elevation, and constant moisture creates the perfect conditions for life to explode in every direction. To understand the true power of the Amazon, we have to travel back, way back. Not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of millions of years into Earth's past. The origins of this rainforest stretch all the way back to the Eocene epoch, around 55 million years ago. Back then, the world was hotter, wetter and wilder. South America was a continent adrift, freshly separated from the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana. Isolated by the growing Atlantic Ocean, the landmass became a natural greenhouse, drawing in warm, humid air that nurtured the spread of tropical forests. But the Amazon, as we know it, didn't just grow. It was shaped by forces beneath the Earth's surface. About 25 million years ago, the Andes Mountains began their towering rise along South America's western edge. This wasn't just a mountain range forming, it was a continental shift that changed everything. As the Andes pushed higher, they created a vast and enclosed basin to the east. Rainwater had nowhere to go. It pooled into wetlands, swamps, and even an immense inland sea that flooded what would become the Amazon basin. Then, nature shifted again. Between 10 and 5 million years ago, this trapped water found a way out. It began to flow eastward. That breakthrough gave birth to the Amazon River, a winding artery of fresh water that would come to define the entire region. As the river surged forward, it carried nutrient-rich sediment from the Andes, feeding the forest and transforming the land into one of the most fertile regions on Earth. But I will tell you more about the Amazon River later in this video. And then came the Ice Ages. During the Pleistocene, the climate of the Amazon changed again. Rainfall dropped, the forest shrank. What followed is undeniable. When the ice retreated and the rains returned, the rainforest grew back, thicker and more vibrant than ever. So the Amazon isn't just a forest, it's the product of relentless time, tectonic upheaval and evolution, a living memory of Earth's ancient past and a dynamic force that still shapes our future. Long before the first European explorers set foot in South America, the Amazon was already home to thriving civilizations. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples have lived in and cared for the rainforest, not as outsiders exploiting it, but as part of its living system. Their knowledge, culture and way of life are woven into the very fabric of the forest. Today, the Amazon is home to over 30 million people, including around 350 distinct ethnic groups. Roughly 9% of this population is indigenous, and their communities span all 9 countries that share the forest. In Brazil alone, more than 3,000 officially recognized indigenous territories cover a significant portion of the rainforest. Some of these communities remain in voluntary isolation, avoiding contact with the outside world. Others live in villages or small towns, maintaining traditions that stretch back millennia. These people don't just live in the Amazon. They know which plants heal and which feed. They know when and where animals migrate, how to fish without emptying rivers, and how to farm without destroying the soil. Their languages often contain terms for landscapes, animals and plants that don't exist in any scientific taxonomy. Many of the crops we depend on today, cassava, peanuts, cacao, tobacco, pineapple, were first cultivated by indigenous peoples of the Amazon. Even the soil tells a story. In several areas, researchers have discovered terra preta, or Amazonian dark earth, incredibly fertile soil created by ancient peoples through the addition of charcoal, compost and organic waste. These soils are thousands of years old, and they remain productive today. Proof of sustainable, long-term land stewardship. But to indigenous communities, the forest is more than survival. It's home to spirits, ancestors, and stories passed down through generations. Hunting, farming, and even movement through the forest follow spiritual rhythms and taboos that help keep nature in balance. This deep-rooted respect has helped preserve vast areas of rainforest for centuries. And then came colonization. From the 1500s onward, disease, slavery and violence devastated indigenous populations. Entire cultures were erased. In the 19th and 20th centuries, waves of exploitation brought further suffering. And the threats haven't stopped. Even today, illegal logging, mining and land grabbing push into indigenous territories. activists who resist face threats, displacement, or worse. The indigenous communities organizing, speaking out, and using tools like GPS and drones to monitor their territories. They are presenting at climate conferences, challenging governments, and winning court cases. The evidence is clear. Forests managed by indigenous peoples are often better protected than those under formal government conservation. That's because, for them, the rainforest isn't a resource. It's home. At the heart of the Amazon lies a powerful force that is so essential to everything around it. This is the Amazon River, the largest river in the world by volume, and perhaps the longest depending on where its source is. Born in the high Andes of Peru, the Amazon begins its journey as a modest stream. But as it travels eastward, it gathers strength. The river is fed by over 1,100 tributaries, such as the Madeira and the Negro, which are huge rivers in their own right. It is an unstoppable current that cuts through the continent and eventually flows into the Atlantic Ocean. At its peak during the rainy season, the river can swell to 40 kilometers wide, transforming from a river into an inland sea. Forests that were dry land just months before become submerged, turning into temporary wetlands full of life. Each year, the Amazon floods its banks, nourishing the forest with a fresh layer of silt and nutrients. These flood pulses breathe life into the ecosystem, triggering fish to spawn in the submerged forest, offering feeding grounds for birds and mammals, and enriching the soil for the lush plant life that follows. This seasonal rhythm is what fuels the unimaginable biodiversity of the Amazon. But the river isn't just nature's lifeline. It's also a lifeline for people. For centuries, indigenous communities have traveled along its waters, fished from its depths, and built entire ways of life around its flow. Even now, many towns and villages deep in the jungle are reachable only by boat. The river connects, feeds, and sustains not only ecosystems but civilizations. The Amazon River moves about 20% of all fresh water that flows into the world's oceans. That's more than any other river system on Earth. It is, quite literally, the pulse of the rainforest. Life here doesn't just live by the river, it lives because of it. If there's one place on Earth where nature throws every color, shape and strategy into the mix, it's the Amazon rainforest. It's the most biologically rich ecosystem on the planet. Scientists estimate that 1 in every 10 known species on Earth calls the Amazon home. And every year, they're still discovering more. We're talking about over 40,000 documented plant species, around 2.5 million types of insects, and tens of thousands more invertebrates. And as for vertebrates, more than 1,200 bird species, almost 430 mammals, 428 amphibians, 378 reptiles, and about 2,200 freshwater fish species. In the thick undergrowth and towering canopy, predators like jaguars and pumas roam with silent grace. On the forest floor, tapirs, peccaries, and capybaras shuffle through the leaves. Then there are the strange and spectacular sloths that move in slow motion. Giant anteaters that sweep the ground with their tongues. And above it all, hundreds of bird species paint the skies. Vivid toucans, chatty macaws, and the formidable harpy eagle, whose talons rival a bear's claws. But it's not just the land that teems with life. The rivers of the Amazon are their own wild kingdom. Like the pink river dolphins, they are gentle, intelligent, and unlike anything in the oceans. they navigate through the flooded forests. Or the electric eels stun their prey with jolts of power. And of course, the infamous piranhas play their own role in the delicate food web. Beneath this stunning animal diversity lies a foundation just as rich: the plants. The Amazon is home to an estimated 16,000 tree species. Towering giants like the kapok and Brazil nut trees form the canopy, blocking out much of the sunlight and creating a dim, humid world below. On the forest floor, ferns, fungi and seedlings thrive in the shadows. Orchids bloom in treetops, bromeliads trap rainwater, and vines climb relentlessly toward the light. One tiny patch of rainforest, just a quarter of a square kilometer, can contain over 1,100 tree species. That's more than in all of North America. Every plant, every animal, every microscopic fungus plays a role. That's why scientists consider the Amazon not just a treasure trove of evolution, but a genetic library that holds answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. Cures, crops, and climate solutions, all hidden in plain sight. Protecting this biodiversity is about preserving the blueprint of life itself. The biodiversity is also largely due to the Amazon's climate. If you could capture the feeling of standing in the Amazon, this would be warm, wet, and endlessly alive. According to the Köppen climate classification system, the Amazon is designated as having an AF climate, tropical rainforest. The A stands for tropical, meaning every month of the year has an average temperature above 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. The F comes from the German word feucht, which means moist, and it indicates that there's no true dry season. Even the driest month sees more than 2.4 inches or 60 millimeters of rainfall. This climate profile, hot and humid all year long with frequent heavy rain, is exactly what defines a rainforest. The Amazon rainforest sits squarely on the equator, and because of that, it lives in a constant state of summer. Day after day, month after month, temperatures hover between 77 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Even at night, it rarely drops below the high 60s. And with the heat comes the humidity. Thick, heavy air that wraps around everything like a living blanket. Most days, the relative humidity sits above 80%. There's no seasonal off switch. Trees don't shed their leaves in the fall. Animals don't hibernate. And food is always available. And then there's the rain. Lots of it. The Amazon is soaked with an average of 80 to 120 inches of rainfall each year. In some areas, especially near the Andes, that number can more than double. Even during the so-called dry season, most of the region still sees at least 2 inches of rain per month. Another key feature of the Köppen AF climate. It never truly dries out. But here's the wild part. The Amazon doesn't just receive rain, it makes rain. Through a process called evapotranspiration, trees draw water from the soil and release it through their leaves into the atmosphere. Millions of liters of moisture rise daily from the forest, forming rain clouds that feed the ecosystem from above. Scientists estimate that up to half of all rainfall in the Amazon is recycled water, falling from clouds that the forest itself created. This self-sustaining loop is what makes the Amazon one of Earth's great climate engines. And its influence doesn't stop at the jungle's edge. Moisture from the Amazon is carried by winds in flying rivers, invisible streams of vapor that drift across South America, bringing rain to far-off lands like southern Brazil, Paraguay, and even northern Argentina. It's a great and efficient system, but also a fragile one. The Amazon climate, stable, warm, humid, is the reason this ecosystem can flourish. But that stability depends on the forest remaining intact. Cut down the trees and the pump stops working, the rain slows and the balance breaks. Which brings us to the next chapter. For millions of years, the Amazon stood untamed, a green ocean untouched by the outside world. But in the blink of a geological eye, that all changed. Until the mid-20th century, much of the rainforest remained wild, shaped only by nature and the traditions of indigenous communities who lived in balance with it. But starting in the 1960s and 70s, a wave of human ambition swept across the region. Governments, especially in Brazil, launched massive development plans to unlock the forest's potential. Roads were carved through the jungle. Colonization programs invited settlers to stake their claims, and global demand for natural resources began to climb. The result? A cascade of destruction. Today, nearly 20% of the original Amazon has been deforested, cleared permanently for pastures, crops, roads and mines. Another 6% is heavily degraded, damaged by logging, fire or drought. Altogether, more than a quarter of the forest has lost its untouched state, and scientists warn we are approaching a point of no return. If deforestation hits around 20 to 25%, the ecosystem may collapse, transforming from rainforest to dry savanna. The Amazon wouldn't just shrink, it would unravel. What's driving this? Economics. The number one culprit is cattle ranching. To produce beef, vast tracts of forest are slashed and burned, turned into grazing land. Brazil is now one of the largest beef exporters on earth, and much of that meat comes from former rainforest. Mining adds another layer. The Amazon is rich in iron, gold, bauxite, oil and gas. Extracting them means digging mines, building pipelines, and laying infrastructure deep in the jungle. Some of this is industrial, like the massive Carajás iron mine, but much is illegal. Small-scale gold miners dredge rivers using mercury, poisoning ecosystems and communities alike. And then there's fire. Every year, tens of thousands of fires are deliberately set to clear land or maintain pasture. These are not natural wildfires, they're human-made, and in a rainforest not built to burn, they can spin out of control. In 2019, smoke from Amazon fires turned day into night in São Paulo, thousands of kilometers away. The smoke chokes the air, the flames release carbon, and the forest weakens. But the damage is not ecological, it's human. Indigenous communities, those who have lived in harmony with the forest for generations, are being pushed out. Their land is stolen, their rights ignored, their leaders threatened or even killed. Names like Chico Mendes and Sister Dorothy Stang are just two of many who gave their lives defending the forest and its people. And unless that system changes, unless policies shift and protections are enforced, the world's greatest rainforest may become its greatest loss. The Amazon plays a critical role in stabilizing our climate. It's a powerful symbol of the Amazon's real value: carbon storage. The trees, plants and soils of the Amazon hold an estimated 100 to 150 billion tons of carbon. That's equivalent to more than a decade of global human carbon emissions. As long as this carbon remains locked in living biomass and the forest floor, it stays out of the atmosphere, keeping our planet cooler. But here's the problem: that balance is starting to break. Historically, the Amazon acted as a carbon sink, absorbing more CO2 than it released. But in recent years, parts of the forest, especially in the east and south, have flipped. Due to widespread deforestation, droughts and fires, the Amazon is now emitting more carbon than it absorbs. When trees are cut or burned, they release their stored carbon, and when droughts, made worse by climate change, weaken the forest's ability to regrow, it can't recapture what's been lost. Fires, often set by humans, add even more CO2, as well as thick smoke that drifts across countries, choking cities and warming the skies. In addition to the Amazon being very important for carbon storage, there is also often fear that the Amazon's oxygen production will be damaged. It is thought that the Amazon produces up to 20% of the world's oxygen. The rainforest is therefore sometimes called the lungs of the earth. But this is a myth. Although the Amazon does indeed produce enormous amounts of oxygen through photosynthesis, the forest and its inhabitants, plants, animals and microbes, use almost all of that oxygen themselves for respiration and decomposition of organic material. On balance, the Amazon therefore contributes almost nothing to the net oxygen content in the atmosphere. What does, for example, provide more than 50% of all oxygen production on Earth is tiny phytoplankton in the oceans. In fact, the oxygen level in our atmosphere has historically been largely built up by these microscopic ocean organisms over billions of years. Globally, we should therefore be more concerned about the release of carbon through destruction. But the consequences go far beyond carbon. The Amazon creates its own rain and recycling moisture through the atmosphere in a delicate feedback loop. When forest cover shrinks, less moisture is released, fewer clouds form and less rain falls. The ground dries, more trees die, fires spread more easily, and the cycle worsens. Scientists fear that if deforestation crosses a tipping point, estimated between 20% and 25%, the system could collapse. The Amazon could transform into a dry savanna. It would lose its ability to regenerate, billions of tons of carbon would be released in a climate shockwave, and the consequences wouldn't stop at the rainforest's edge. Rainfall in southern Brazil, Paraguay and Argentina depends heavily on vapor from the Amazon. If the forest falls, farms hundreds of miles away could fail. Crops could die, water supplies could shrink, and food security could become a crisis. Even global weather patterns could shift. Moisture and energy from the Amazon help shape jet streams and climate systems far beyond South America. We don't yet know the full extent of that influence, but we know enough to be worried. And we're already seeing signs. The droughts of 2005, 2010, and 2015 to 2016 were unlike anything in recorded history. Rivers ran low, trees withered, and fires exploded. But for all the threats facing the Amazon, there is still hope. All across the rainforest, people are fighting to protect what remains and restore what's been lost. Governments, NGOs, scientists, and local communities are working together to defend this irreplaceable ecosystem. In Brazil, over half of the Amazon is formally designated as protected land, national parks, nature reserves, and indigenous territories. Initiatives like the ARPA program have added more than 60 million hectares to this protected network, backed by funding and management plans that aim to make the protection real, not just theoretical. To prevent illegal logging, poaching and land grabs, authorities are deploying satellites, drones and boots on the ground. Local communities are trained and empowered to monitor their own territories. Real-time data now makes it possible to detect and respond to deforestation almost as it happens. Globally, the message is sinking in. Saving the Amazon is not just South America's problem, it's everyone's. Funds like the Amazon Fund, backed by countries like Norway and Germany, are helping finance forest conservation and sustainable development. In 2023, a renewed commitment under President Lula's leadership slashed deforestation rates in Brazil by nearly 50% in a single year. Proof that political will and enforcement can turn the tide. And cooperation is growing. At the Amazon Summit in Belém, leaders from 8 Amazon nations agreed to a shared vision for the rainforest's future. But protection is only half the battle. Projects are underway to reforest degraded lands, both through tree planting and natural regeneration. In some places, the forest needs only to be left alone to begin healing. In others, trees are planted to reconnect fragmented habitats or stabilize riverbanks. And agroforestry, where crops are grown alongside native trees, is offering farmers a way to earn a living while restoring the land. Instead of slashing new forest, they revitalize old fields with food, shade and biodiversity. Perhaps most powerful of all is the rising voice of the people. So where does that leave us? We have discussed that the Amazon rainforest is a beautiful and special part of the world. It has existed for millions of years and has developed into a rainforest with a rich biodiversity and a special ecosystem. It is tropical and it provides its own water. Furthermore, it is home to thousands of indigenous peoples. But it is also at a crossroads. Yes, the damage is immense, yes, the threats are real, but it is not too late. Its rivers help shape the weather. Its trees store our carbon. Its species hold the keys to future cures, crops and climate resilience. And its people remind us that there is a way to live in balance with the earth. Governments, indigenous peoples, NGOs, scientists and everyday consumers all have a role to play. Through protection, restoration, sustainable development and a deeper respect for the land, we can keep the Amazon alive. The future of the Amazon depends on a long-term vision, one where the true value of nature outweighs the short-term profits of destruction. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video and what you think of the Amazon. And subscribe to this channel for more videos on geography and climate.